The rain had been falling for hours by the time Batman descended into the forgotten arteries beneath Gotham, tracing whispers of a shipment that even the League of Assassins spoke of with unease. Deep within the abandoned subway tunnels, forgotten by maps and swallowed by silence, he found them. Crates stamped with an insignia belonging to a corporation that had officially ceased to exist years ago. Viral samples sealed in glass that shimmered like frozen starlight. He never got the chance to secure the evidence. The firefight erupted without warning, muzzle flashes carving shapes into the concrete dark. Then something older than any weapon activated. A hidden device buried within the crates convulsed with light, and space itself seemed to tear open with a sound like a dying god exhaling. When Batman opened his eyes again, the rain was still falling, but it was no longer Gotham's rain. The skyline burned beneath crimson emergency lights. Military helicopters circled somewhere above the smoke. Police frequencies bled desperate voices into his cowl before cutting into silence, one by one, like candles snuffed by unseen hands. This place resembled Gotham after a chemical attack, and yet something felt fundamentally wrong. Criminal intent had been replaced by something colder, older, more primal. Extinction had a scent, and this city was drowning in it. He moved with disciplined precision, gathering civilians from ruined storefronts and overturned cars, collecting evidence with hands that had never trembled in the face of monsters. But the biology he found defied logic. Coordinated infection patterns, deliberate experimentation, a conspiracy vast enough to eclipse every enemy he had ever faced. His methods faltered. Fear could not intimidate creatures incapable of feeling it. Every rescue drew larger hordes, and every saved life risked dozens more. Then he saw the police station, walls scarred by gunfire, defenders inside fighting shapes that should not exist. One survivor raised a weapon toward him and hissed a name he did not recognize: Umbrella. Inside the Raccoon City Police Department, the air was thick with the smell of gunpowder, antiseptic, and quiet desperation. Batman moved through the shattered corridors like a shadow given purpose, and the survivors watched him with the wary eyes of people who had forgotten what leadership looked like. Veteran officers, government agents, and civilians told him fragments of the truth. Umbrella had spent decades transforming science into a weapon, and greed had finally erased the line between medicine and annihilation. He assumed command without asking permission. He reinforced barricades, mapped evacuation corridors, and drafted contingency plans in the margins of blood-stained reports. Exhausted men and women straightened their shoulders around him, finding fragments of hope in his calm precision. For the first time in days, they believed a plan could actually hold. But this world refused Gotham's rules. Ammunition dwindled. Medical supplies vanished faster than they could be counted. Rescue helicopters that departed never returned. Some of the infected still whispered the names of their loved ones before their bodies twisted into something monstrous. And every choice became an equation without a merciful answer. Then came the creature that watched him. A tyrant, immense and deliberate, retreating from each encounter only to return sharper, faster, more attuned to his movements. It studied him. It learned him. Every gadget he used became a lesson written into its evolving flesh. The survivors began to argue. Some infections could not be reversed, they said. Some monsters could only be ended. Batman refused. Every disease had a cure, he insisted, if the evidence was preserved. That evidence came in the form of encrypted Umbrella files, revealing an underground laboratory experimenting on something far older than the T-virus. Something recovered from ruins buried beneath forgotten European soil. The outbreak had never been the goal. It had been a rehearsal. When the station's defenses finally collapsed beneath a tide of adapting horrors, Batman faced an impossible choice. Save the data that might one day cure the world, or sacrifice it to save the people standing beside him tonight. They descended through Umbrella's forgotten transit tunnels, following corroded rails into a darkness that seemed to breathe. What waited below was not a laboratory in any ordinary sense. It was a cathedral of ambition, its vaulted ceilings arching over sterile chambers, its walls humming with the quiet devotion of scientists who had mistaken discovery for divinity. The architecture itself confessed the sin. Modern steel had been welded atop far older stone, ruins that predated language, where symbols worn smooth by millennia still refused to fade. Batman moved through the research logs like a man reading someone else's confession. The viruses that had devoured cities had never been original creations. They were imitations. Crude echoes of an ancient parasitic organism whose evolutionary elegance had shattered every theory humanity had built around life itself. Every outbreak was another failure, another arrogant attempt to reproduce something that should never have been touched. The revelation reshaped him. Gotham's criminals had chosen corruption. Umbrella's architects had believed they were building perfection. Their true evil had not been hatred, but ambition without conscience, curiosity without cost. Alongside him walked a survivor whose faith had been buried long before the outbreak. Their conversations were quiet, layered with fatigue. Through them, Batman recognized a wound he had not known he carried. His symbol inspired courage only where people still believed in tomorrow. Here, tomorrow was a language nobody spoke anymore, the Tyrant returned. Its body glistened with fresh mutations engineered from every recorded confrontation. Every gadget met a countermeasure. Every strike met evolved sinew. Batman abandoned strength and reached deeper, into the discipline that had made him a detective before it made him a legend. He predicted the creature. He read it the way he read Gotham's alleys. And in that patience, he found the seams no muscle could open. Their battle carved a path into the central chamber, where researchers had attempted to awaken the original organism responsible for every strain that had ever bled into the world. Containment systems flickered. Warning lights bled crimson across the floor. He understood then that every outbreak had merely delayed the true awakening. Raccoon City was not an ending. It was a warning written in ruined flesh and forgotten stone. The alarm shifted pitch, deeper, mournful, final. Somewhere far beneath them, something ancient stirred inside its cradle, and the walls themselves seemed to inhale in recognition. Umbrella's deepest laboratory opened before them like the throat of a mountain that had been waiting patiently to swallow the world. When the ancient organism finally emerged from its shattered containment, it did not roar. It observed. It moved with the fluid intelligence of something that had witnessed extinctions long before humanity learned to name them. Around it, the ruins of Umbrella's discarded experiments trembled, and one by one they were drawn into its evolving mass. Failed tyrants dissolved into its shifting form. Forgotten bioweapons became new limbs, new instincts, new hungers. It was becoming the sum of every mistake humanity had ever made. Batman understood almost immediately that victory in any traditional sense had already died. Every strike he considered was a lesson he would be handing to the creature. Every technique would return refined against him. This was not a villain to defeat, not a criminal to redeem. It was evolution weaponized, and it recognized no language but adaptation. The survivors gathered around a failing console, preparing to trigger the laboratory's self-destruct system. Doing so would erase every remaining record of Umbrella's research, every possible cure, every fragment of knowledge that might one day save millions. Batman resisted the choice for a long, brutal moment. His entire life had been built upon the belief that knowledge preserved lives. Yet as he watched the creature consume Umbrella's proudest achievements and turn them into weapons aimed at their own creators, he finally accepted a truth he had spent decades refusing. Some discoveries do not deserve to survive. Then the tyrant returned, battered, half-consumed, still hunting him. But instinct is a cruel author, and its programming demanded the elimination of rival bioweapons. It threw itself against the ancient organism with the fury of a broken god, buying seconds that no one else could have offered. For the briefest moment, humanity's worst creation became the shield protecting its creators. Batman did not waste it. He did not attack the creature directly, he guided it. He led it deeper into the laboratory, toward the experimental reactors humming with unstable viral energy. He knew its hunger. He knew it could not resist evolution offered so openly. And when it consumed what it could not assimilate, its own perfection turned against it. The explosion tore through the underground complex, folding steel and stone into a single roaring breath of light. Survivors escaped through fractured corridors, coughing, bleeding, alive. Every record of Umbrella's research burned behind them. When they finally reached the surface, dawn was breaking over Raccoon City's ruins. Hope, quiet and uncertain, returned to a world that had almost forgotten its meaning. Beyond the quarantine zone, the survivors walked as though each step was a prayer they were still learning how to speak. Batman moved among them, exhausted, scarred, quieter than before. They carried no trophies, only proof that compassion could survive even in a world civilization had abandoned. That, he realized, was the only victory this place had ever allowed. He reflected on how deeply this world had reshaped him. Gotham had taught him that fear could be mastered through discipline. Raccoon City had shown him enemies beyond morality, monsters born not from cruelty but from ambition that had forgotten its own limits. And yet, standing beside these survivors, he understood that heroism was never measured by whether every life could be saved. It was measured by whether hope endured when every reason to keep it had already burned away. The survivors began to rebuild not around governments, not around corporations, but around trust earned through sacrifice. In their whispers, Batman became less a vigilante and more a legend, a silent guardian who had arrived when extinction pressed closest and vanished before anyone could truly know his name. Eventually, the unstable dimensional technology stirred once more beneath the ruined laboratory, flickering with the same violent light that had first torn him from Gotham. Before stepping through, he left behind encrypted evidence exposing every surviving Umbrella operation across the world, ensuring that future heroes would inherit knowledge instead of ignorance. Back in Gotham, only moments had passed, yet Batman felt the difference in himself immediately. His investigations sharpened toward the prevention of dangerous technologies rather than the punishment of those who wielded them. He no longer saw monsters as individuals alone, but as the inevitable consequence of unchecked ambition. In the Batcave's deepest vault, he sealed the final Umbrella sample recovered beneath Gotham's subway. As he turned to leave, the containment monitor flickered once. The sample emitted a faint pulse unlike any recorded before, quiet, patient, and unmistakably alive.